Hi, everyone. This is the Volta TST meeting for May 19th, 2020. We have a few items on the agenda, and so let's get started. The first item was the Kind Volta refactor proposal. This is from David Bainbridge. He's let me know that he will not, he's not available right now, but that we should have a discussion of this in any case. Is there someone who can speak to this, or I can go through the document?
Did he say he's going to join later, or?
He said he'd be free at past. So should we delay this and wait?
Yeah, we could probably flip this agenda.
Okay. Alrighty, let's move on. We had a few discussion items. One was the Akranos SIBA blueprint upstreaming. I see Cyprian's on.
Yes, hello.
Would you like to talk about this?
Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry if this link is not exactly, the most relevant. Quite recently, last week, I've refactored a bit the Akrano wiki pages. And right now what you're looking at is the old page about the porting effort and the upstreaming work, which is now also linked underneath the bigger page, which is called SIBA for ARM documentation. And if you go, it's on the left-hand side. Yeah, that one. So if you look here, there's a bit more information about, and a bit more context, I would say, about the work for SIBA for ARM. And the document itself and the link posted on the agenda is not necessarily the starting point. I feel that since we haven't really talked about the upstreaming work and the multi-arch brigade in quite a long time, I would say it would be beneficial to try to, sync up, maybe try to get the ball rolling again. It's kind of a long discussion, I would say, but Zach, as you know, you have been our main contact, and what little time you had at disposal wasn't really enough to get anything significant contributed from the Ukrainian side or our side. So I guess what I'm looking at, what I'm looking for is maybe revive this subject again and see what we're at. Maybe see if there's some plans for the future.
Not to speak as the this is probably not the word of ONF coming down, but all of the work that I've been doing in regard to this has been in line with making the doing improvements to the CI pipeline, which I think were detailed somewhere here.
Yeah, in the other page. So if you go that,
right.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things we're making our CI system modular and being able to handle multiple architectures. And the biggest issue for me is just getting time to do that with all the other things on my plate. I don't have an ETA for this, and I haven't for quite a while, just because of all the other demands on my time. I don't know what to say other than that. This hasn't been either just the independent CI work or the work for the Akrano side of things hasn't been a priority. And maybe because we have a new TST, I'm wondering if they have an opinion as to the priority of making that work.
What is the? Hey, can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out what is the ask from the TST since you brought up this topic.
So are you asking if this is the right context to be talking
No,
about
I'm
this?
asking what are you what are you proposing? What are you requesting? What is it from the community that you want? What is it from the TST, the decision that you need? I'm trying to figure that out. You're just trying to revive a topic?
Well, to start with, there is some context behind it, some background information that I'm not going to try to go through them. Simply put, I'm asking for help. Getting the work, the necessary work for the CI infrastructure, to get that going again, because there was the first attempt, and you can see the 3 changes underneath. But at some point, things got reassessed. So I'm just trying to get some sort of involvement. That would be ideal.
Right.
Perhaps not. Perhaps there's other problems, like for instance, lack of resources or lack of interest. But what I'm asking, what we basically need is more support to get things done, because I for one don't have enough understanding of the open core infrastructure to do everything on myself, on my own.
Yeah. Okay. And remind me again, this is so that the SIBA software can be targeted to ARM-based processors, and so you're working with a certain release that you want to upstream for ARM-based capabilities?
Yeah, well, so to speak. If you scan the bigger page, the SIBA for ARM documentation, I have, and you need to look at our porting iteration 2 and software based. If you go to software based, for instance, then you will see the kind of work we've done on the software base where we started from, and it's something that was in upstream in March 12 or something like this. So what we are essentially doing is what we have done was to pick some development version of Helm charts and automation tools and Chord Tester. We forked them because we wanted to have a stable baseline, a stable enough baseline that it's not affected by a major upstream work. And we essentially took that baseline for these components and use that as a reference points. And we did a few changes, built new Docker images that are not, simply do not exist for ARM, both for Chord related components and for other things, like for instance, Kafka, HCD operator, in Kibana, Grafana, things like this that simply do not exist for ARM. So it's hard for me to kind of tell what's the specific version that we are based on. But we did that because we were unable to keep up with the upstream flow. So we just, decided, let's take whatever is stable now. And that was around March, and build upon that. And that's basically Chord 7.2.3 with a few additions. And, it uses these components. Like, for instance, we have ONOS chart version 2.0.1 beta 2, which we should probably update, but since it worked, we didn't really see a need for that. And there's more information on maybe it's not very well structured, but I believe there's enough information here to get going on exactly what we are running. But to be honest, I don't understand myself very well at this point because I've been out of contact with what's been happening in open core. So I don't really understand where is open core at in terms of SIBA development.
Right. So I can help you out there. I mean, the last SIBA release that we did was probably June or July of last year. Mm-hmm. And when I say a SIBA release, that means everything that falls under SIBA, including all the things that you have shown on this table over here. Since about June or July of last year, we have focused on only a part of SIBA, right? What we call, say, 60% of SIBA, where really we're looking at Volta, we're looking at ONOS, we're looking at OpenOLT, and that's it. We haven't really focused on the switching infrastructure. We haven't focused on the orchestration. We have not really focused on the monitoring infrastructure either. We're pushing things up to Kafka, but not really looking at how we're pulling things off of it and doing things. So in the last 7 or 8 months, basically, it's been about largely about Volta and ONOS. And so we've done 2 releases since then, one in December, one in March. And until this particular stack becomes production quality, say till the end of the year, we do not envision having the resources, the time to go back and do a full SIBA release again.
Of course, I understand that, and we pretty much knew that when we started this porting effort in March. But it was either do that or sit on our hands doing nothing. And in my opinion, doing this effort would help for us guys in Akraino and the Akraino SIBA blueprints to get up to speed with what's happening in upstream open core until the end of the year when the MVP is scheduled. So I know that this is not an actual release. That's why I'm also calling this. If you look down below for the name of the release of the release charts, they are called. I've appended Dev ARM 64. Right. So I knew very well that this is not an actual release, but it was a necessary step because we were based on core platform 6.1.0, and that was very old, and we really needed to get up to speed with up to date with something really that's recent in terms of SIBA. And yeah, I guess what I'm getting to is that what our goal is long term is to have this work for ARM be seamlessly, the support for ARM to be seamlessly working in upstream, and us doing this effort of taking this intermediate development version of SIBA and the other components is just the first step towards doing that. We actually demonstrate that we have it running, and we're also running SIBA in a box using clusters of 3 nodes instead of a single node like you do in OpenCore. So if you look down below, there's a link to the Jenkins Akraino where we deploy. That one with that one. So this is basically a pipeline, if that's what it's called. It's a multi-job, and it does a few steps. It deploys the the platform, the base platform OS with Kubernetes and Docker and all that stuff. Then there's validation, which is Akraino specific, and then you have another 2 jobs which are called install SIBA on ARM and test SIBA on ARM. Install SIBA on ARM is basically using automation tools to deploy SIBA in a box on clusters of 3 nodes, like I said before. And if you look down at the end, you will see SIBA installation finished successfully, exactly like it's in upstream. I think you missed it. Yeah, it was like that, around that. This is just things at the end of the job. Just look for SIBA installation successfully, or SIBA. This is the exact same output from the OpenCore CIAB job, which is either build tests or build test stable, or build test latest. And if you go back now and look at the other job, the test SIBA on ARM, you should also look at build number 22, because the others who were not deployed on CBA was not deployed. So this is also, using open core tools, specifically automation tools, which is called with make run test, which in turn calls, uses core tester and runs the capp.robot. And this should also be familiar to you because it's the actual tests that are running in CBA in a box. This again is running on the 3 node clusters deployed with what's called integrated edge cloud platform. And this is just a collection of Ubuntu 18.04, Kubernetes at this point 1.15, Docker, I think, I don't know the exact version of Docker, but it's not important. And on top of that, all the other stuff, Helm, and then comes the actual CBA platform. So I think this is it's important for me to show you this because in terms of upstreaming, this is in my opinion a necessary step forward. We've already done a major chunk of the work, which was figuring out some of the problems. We had to patch a few Docker files in order to get, like for instance, ONOS built for ARM64, and there were a few issues with Voltha and so on. But we basically went through that ordeal, and we have something which, albeit is forked from upstream, but it's as much as possible using and not altering the upstream code to as much as possible.
Okay, yes, thanks. I mean, it's a lot of good work. Right now, our biggest problem is resources and priorities. And I'm afraid that, getting this work upstream is not a priority. It's not a priority for any of the operators involved right now.
Yeah,
I know, even if
but,
it wasn't a priority,
yeah, go ahead.
Even if it wasn't a priority, it would be a question of resources. Because under the current sort of economic scenario, there are certain challenges, and we don't have the resources to work on this, given our other higher priority items.
Well, yeah,
So,
I would maybe like to comment on that because I think even before the COVID situation, things were pretty much the same. But in my case at least, we are only doing our part of the job, and it was our job to do as much as possible the porting. And for me at least, there was no, and for us there was no other alternative than to try to finish this work. And I'm just showing it to you right now. I know that perhaps the priorities and like you said, resources is not in the right place at the moment. On the other hand, MVP is scheduled for the end of the year, and who knows, maybe things will maybe change until that. But in case you were not aware of the kind of work we did, I hope this is a good introduction.
yes, thank you, Cyprian. It's it's understood, it's recorded. We are aware of it. It's just not high on our priority list right now. Perhaps things will change in the towards the end of the year.
Cyprian?
Yeah. Okay. I'm only one other note is that with in the previous discussions I had with Zach, we were kind of stopped at the discussion about some of the changes for the infrastructure, and if possible, I would still like to be involved in when and if the time comes to tackle those problems. And there's a few of them, like for instance, upgrading to LF infra tools, and then a bunch of other stuff. Zach knows better about that.
I can speak to that. I still intend to do that work. It's just hasn't reached the point where it's a stopping other work. And that's mainly the way that we've been proceeding there is unless something is really broken in that scenario, in those CI systems, those sort of changes aren't being made. That may change. I had one other question. Because you said you're using components from other, so for example, you needed Onos to get ARM compatible and Kibana and some of the Elastic components working. How has the upstreaming work been going for getting those changes into the other upstream projects?
We haven't really looked at upstreaming those, and I know it's also a big issue in the picture. For the moment, we have our own set of charts. It's described in the documentation. We basically set up a few Helm repositories using GitHub pages. So if we're talking about how we solve the issue of those things not being available until upstreaming, I think it's there's at least one option of installing those non-open code related stuff from a different Helm repository, and it so happens that we name them as the same like automation tools in cBinabox named them, and that is stable in incubator. It's just that we are taking them from a different URL.
Right. So I can say that when the time comes on the CI side, I will let you know when I am making changes that you could contribute to.
That's.
I just am not aware of when that's going to be. So, but I will loop you in that at that point.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
Again, like I said in the beginning, I just feel there was, the context was kind of lost almost entirely on this work, and I know there's not much, interest, or perhaps not enough people pushing this, or I don't know, in order to generate the interest. But then again, it's my responsibility, so to speak, to get this advertised as much as possible, and that's pretty much all I wanted to do.
Yeah, thank you, Cyprian. And I also want to concur with Sarah that the work being done to run the tests and other stuff in the Ukraino context looks really good.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other comments on this topic? Okay, the next item on the agenda was, in the discussion items, was the Protos cleanup. I think, Kent, you brought this up about the image download still needed.
Yes. So I was looking through the Protos for some unrelated changes. And I had open sort of not only the Protos, but also Voltha Go, the OF agent Go, and the OLT adapter, and sort of had all the references open of where things are used. And I noticed that image download it's referenced in a few places, and there's a little bit of code around it, but it doesn't seem to actually go anywhere. It doesn't need to be used today. When I brought it up with Ken, he mentioned that it's probably a holdover from 1.0 and isn't actually used. And I'm wondering if anybody's actively using it, or if I can remove it and sort of clean up the code a bit by getting rid of it.
One question I have is, will this come into play, or is any way related to the ONU software update via OMCI?
Yeah, it's related to that. I think that needs to be done before the end of this year, I believe. Yeah, it's a hangover from the previous version of the Voltha release, but that's needed actually when we start tackling the ONU software upgrade.
So if that is the case, I would not actually remove it. I know it's not used at this time, but since we kind of need it in the future, there's really not that much worth in removing it. At least that is my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too.
So should we make, well, I guess just a note should be left then that whenever that's actually tackled, they can, whoever's tackling it can rewrite it, but like however they want. Because if nobody else is using it as it is today, there's no reason to use it exactly as it is. Like somebody can rewrite it to be more close to what they need. Is that what everyone agrees with that?
Yeah, if you're already touching the protos, it might be well worth putting a note there that it's not currently used in any code, can be changed, but I wouldn't. But again, I wouldn't remove it. So I think that the to do or note or fix me or something there is probably the best way forward.
Okay. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll add that note, and that's all I need for this.
It's Manuel here. I would support what Andrea said. I think that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. I think the next topic is about device management. Scott, is this something that is your topic?
I'm thinking actually, I added it last night. There was an email that went out to the community regarding some discussions and decisions that the TST had taken on the topic of device management. So that was sent out to the CIBA Volta mailing list. And so I just put it on the agenda to ask if anybody had any questions regarding those decisions. We can help answer them. So does anyone have any questions? Does anyone know what email I'm referring to?
So this is the mail that you're referring to, correct, Saro?
Yes, that is right.
Okay. So, did you want to walk through this, or does anyone have questions about?
Oh, it's a long mail. I don't really want to read it, but the high level thing is that we have made a decision to define and build an interface over gRPC to the so-called device managers. And that interface will be based on RFC 8348 YANG modules for the hardware that is listed in that RFC. The YANG module name is IANA hardware, and they cover the most things that are required, that are fans and LEDs and power supplies and CPU and so on. The community is not responsible for actually building the device managers. That is the responsibility of the vendors. But we will be building that interface and a test harness around it. The idea is that the TST is doing it has agreed to do how should I put it, work that the TST believes is orthogonal to our purpose, our focus, and so we're doing this in a limited way in terms of defining the interface. We do believe that our main focus is on the control aspects of Volta and ONOS. and not particularly in the device management aspects. It's more about pawn management and control. But because there is an operator need, we have decided to pursue this interface definition. So this work will likely kick off in a brigade, and while we haven't discussed who's going to lead the brigade, we will make a decision quickly on it, and we'll start off the discussions about the interface, taking the Yang module definitions, interpreting them in gRPC protobufs, and hosting those protobufs in an ONF repository, but separate from the Volta protobuf definitions. Okay, so that's, there are a few other questions of overlap between responsibilities of the device manager and the responsibilities of Volta. And those are decisions that we have postponed. We expect the brigade to work on it, bring proposals to the TST, and those decisions will be made down the line. But that overlap, for example, port definitions, right? Port IDs, port statistics, being able to enable or disable the ports, or reboot the device in itself. These are things that both Volta can do, and in principle, the device manager can do as well. So who does what? What IDs do we use? What kind of, do we pull statistics from both and publish them both on Kafka? The way we publish them, the schemas, are they going to be the same? Are they going to be different? So on and so forth. Those are decisions that we have postponed, and we hope that the brigade has good discussions about it and brings proposals to the TST. Any questions?
Saurav, do we have someone who's leading the device management brigade, or is this being done under another brigade?
No, we don't have the brigade yet. And we haven't made a decision on who's going to lead it. But we expect to have that decision this week, or fairly quickly.
So just to clarify, this is almost a separate project in some sense. Like it's in the same way that Volta is part of SIVA, but it's handled separately.
Yes, that is correct.
Bit of a separate, okay.
This is a separate effort. I wouldn't quite call it a separate project. If it was a separate project, we'd be building all the reference software for it. But as I clearly mentioned in that email, we are not looking to build the device manager ourselves. What we will have is the reference protobufs and a test harness, you can imagine. So it falls under the SIVA umbrella, just like Volta does. But this effort is separate from Volta. However, we do need to manage these areas of overlap. It has to work well with Volta, on the side. So that's about it.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Saurav, it's Manu. Just a quick comment. First of all, thanks very much to the TST for taking this consideration and the, so to speak, time and due diligence to consider all of the impact. Sounds very sensible. I think from the perspective of how the new API and this particular technical path or technical arm is going to be used in the first place, right, in the very near term and upcoming work, I think it would be for certain monitoring, specific device monitoring features again, which may or may not be present today. And then in addition to that, the software upgrade for the OLT, right? So I think these would be the high priority areas as far as it looks to me.
Okay, good to know. To build software upgrade into the device manager, I don't think I saw that in the RFC 8348 descriptions, but I guess, okay, the brigade can tackle that and see if certain extensions are necessary to the protobufs. Are you aware of a software upgrade being a part of 8348?
I have to admit I haven't drilled into this level of detail. I have looked at the RFC myself even, so I would say I could claim I have a bit of understanding about it, but I haven't actually looked into the details whether it has the model inside or submodel that allows software upgrade. But I think that would be up for the brigade, as you say. So I will definitely look into internally ATT if we can support and contribute. Then I guess a brigade will make a call for contribution on that device management API, and so we'll be happy to support on progressing this work. And then just as one more thought, I don't know if the TST is far enough in the discussion to give certain guidance on the issues that you have pointed out with regards to the responsibility of Voltha versus device management. As far as it again looks to me, but that might be maybe a little preliminary, I would think that the initial guidance could be that just all of the features or functions that works through Voltha today would not be the first priority to be rebuilt through device management, meaning in general, the device management API, as it looks to me, is not supposed to replace anything that is currently supported through Voltha. It is the contrary. It just has to fill some of the gaps or do some of the tasks that are not sensible to do by Voltha. So it's not a gap in Voltha. It's just a different set of tasks that are running through this interface or through this path. And still, if there is overlap, for example, on the OLT reboot or PON port, sorry, not just PON port, but port in general, enable, disable operations, I would think that what works with Voltha does not need to be rebuilt through device management in the first place. But I don't know if that is something that the TST has already looked into or has some additional guidance.
So I think we need more discussion, but I think some of us certainly favor that chain of thought that we want to minimize the things that are overlap, not have multiple ways to do the same thing. But like I said, I think we need to have more discussions as a group or perhaps in the brigade. But yes, I mean, certainly, if there are other things that we need to actually do through device management, let's do that first, right? And focus less on the things that we can do through Voltha today. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Zach.
Okay, thanks, Sarov. So it doesn't look like we have David back, but I just wanted to mention again his kind Volta refactor proposal. He asked that people would take a look at this, and basically the thrust of this is to separate kind Volta into two sections: one that manages infrastructure, and the one that manages the Volta stack.
So, Zach, if you want, I can speak very little about it.
Okay, go ahead, Matteo.
Yeah, so basically there is an effort ongoing in the scalability brigade to deploy multiple Volta stacks onto the same Kubernetes cluster. And as expected, we're pending some pieces of the code that need to be one of the things we'll need to improve is the way to facilitate the deployment of these multiple stacks on a shared infrastructure. And this refactoring is David's solution to this problem. It basically separates what is infrastructure, so basically etcd and Kafka, from what is Voltha, so the core and the adapter. In this way, you can deploy a common infrastructure onto your cluster and then decide how many stacks you want to deploy using that shared infrastructure. This is pretty much it. Then the detailed plan is described here in the document. So if everyone is interested, please go through it. But basically, it's really separating Voltha from the message bus and the database.
Yeah, when David brought this up last time I was talking to him, I was generally in favor myself. It feels like what we did with SIBA, where we separated out some of the infrastructure from components like XOS. You don't want the components that are using the infrastructure to also be deploying the infrastructure. Those should be two separate steps. So I can't think of any reason not to do this. This seems like a good idea to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. This will also shorten the development loop for multiple people if they do Voltha up and Voltha down. That will now become stuck up and stuck down because not redeploying Kafka and etcd, that the cycle will be much faster.
And I think also this goes in the direction of software update that we talked about, which is very good. So I think it enables us also to go towards that goal, which is in the upcoming months, something that we have to do. So I'm for this.
To make a decision on this, does this need to go through the TST or?
No, I don't think so. I think there's generic consensus that it's a good thing.
Okay.
Plus, it also came from one of the TST members, so
right.
So we can ask. I mean, if any of the other TST, if anyone has any concern, whether it's in the community or from anyone in the TST that is on the call right now, if there's any concern about this proposal. Yeah, as I expected, I don't think there's any concern. So we're good to go.
Okay, I'll let David know that we have the go-ahead. Thank you, Matteo, for giving that summary. And that's the last item we have for today's meeting. I'll give people some time back, unless anyone has any other topics. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Cheers. Goodbye.